What if everything you know about the moon is wrong? What if there is evidence that indicates that our natural satellite was once inhabited by a lost civilization? This may sound like a conspiracy theory, but leaked documents, mysterious images, and reports from astronauts suggest something much bigger than we were led to believe. NASA has always shown us the moon as an arid desert with no atmosphere, no life. But is that the whole truth? Today, you will discover shocking evidence that could completely change the way we see the history of humanity and even our role in the universe. Symmetrical structures, geometric shadows, and even signs of possible engineering are just some of the elements that defy the official explanation and the most intriguing. Many of these images were recorded by space missions, but have never received a convincing explanation. But why hide it? Does NASA have information that cannot be revealed to the public? And more importantly, if there really was some form of civilization on the moon, who were they and what happened to them? Were they visitors from another world? Or could it be something much more disturbing, a past that humanity itself has forgotten? This might be one of the most revealing videos you've ever watched. We are not just talking about vague hypotheses, but about real records, scientific analyses, and testimonies that point to a truth hidden for decades. Each detail may contain a fundamental piece in understanding what really happened on the moon, and why we returned so few times after the Apollo era. And before we go any further, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the moon can hide secrets that have not yet been revealed? Do you think space missions are omitting important information? Comment now and tell me what you think, because in the next few minutes, you'll see images and facts that could change your perspective forever. But be careful. Some of this evidence is so shocking that it has already been subject to censorship and heated discussions. Are you ready to see what NASA never wanted you to know? If you've made it this far, it's because you feel like there's something more to this story, something that isn't being told. And believe me, you are not alone in this search for truth. NASA has always been a source of knowledge and innovation, but it is also one of the most closed institutions when it comes to space mysteries. What if I told you that there is information about the moon that has been deliberately erased from public records? Why were some missions interrupted without explanation? What was really found on the far side of the moon, the one we never see from here on Earth? You can't miss the next few minutes of this video as we analyze images, documents, and testimonies that challenge everything we believe to be true. And believe me, the more you know about this subject, the more you will understand why certain information simply disappears, as if it never existed. This is exactly why it is essential that more people have access to this information and know what really happens behind the scenes of space exploration. So, before we continue, I need you to do something very important. Like this video and subscribe to the channel right now. This is not just a symbolic gesture. It is a real way of ensuring that more people discover this information and that this type of content continues to be produced. With each like and subscription, the algorithm understands that this subject needs to be seen by more people, and together we can spread this evidence to as many curious people and investigators as possible. Don't leave it for later, because as you will see below, some information disappears from the internet without explanation. Can you imagine trying to come back here later and realizing that this video is no longer available? Well, it wouldn't be the first time this has happened. So secure your place in this investigation now, because what comes next could be the key to finally understanding what's being hidden about the moon. Are you ready to take the next step and discover what NASA never wanted you to know? NASA has taught us that the moon is just an inert satellite, a rocky body with no atmosphere, no signs of life, and no evidence of civilization. From the first observations made with rudimentary telescopes to the high-resolution images captured by space probes, official history tells us that the moon has always been a dead world. But is this really the whole truth? The Apollo missions, particularly the iconic Apollo 11, brought back stunning images and samples of lunar soil. We were shown an arid environment with no signs of life or buildings. But what not everyone knows is that not all of the images captured were released. Many files have simply disappeared, and declassified documents indicate that there are hidden records of something far beyond what has been presented to the public. Have you ever stopped to think why, after a few manned missions, we just never came back? If the moon was such an important goal during the space race, why don't we continue to explore it with the same intensity? The hidden side of the moon, the one we can never see from Earth, has always generated great mystery. Unlike the visible side, this lunar hemisphere never receives direct light from the sun, and for a long time it was an enigma even for science. When probes were finally sent to map this region, what was found raised even more questions. Some images revealed unusual formations, structures that appeared to be artificially constructed, geometric patterns that defy conventional explanations. And the most curious thing, China, which recently sent a mission to explore the far side of the moon, Lunar, has also avoided commenting on some of the discoveries made by its rovers. Furthermore, there are documents that indicate that the United States government already knew more about the moon than it publicly admitted. The famous Horizon Project, a secret military plan from the 1950s, envisaged the construction of a manned base on the lunar surface for strategic purposes. What would motivate such an ambitious plan at that time, long before man arrived on the moon? Was it just an attempt to dominate space? Or was there something on the moon that needed to be monitored closely? Another curious fact is that there are records that even before the Apollo 11 mission, some space broadcasts were censored in real time. Astronauts would have reported anomalies on the lunar surface, strange lights, and even unexpected movements. These reports were hushed up or classified, and those who tried to speak out on the subject ended up falling into oblivion or had their careers abruptly ended. Buzz Aldrin, one of the most famous astronauts from the Apollo 11 mission, once made intriguing statements about something he saw in space, but quickly recanted later. Coincidence? And we cannot forget a crucial detail. The moon directly influences life on Earth. Its gravitational field affects tides, stabilizes the planet's axis of rotation, and may even have played a key role in the evolution of life. This means that any changes to the moon could have a direct impact on us. Now think, what if there was something more there? Something that would be kept secret to avoid panic or even prevent new questions from being asked. Conventional science tells us that the moon is just a natural satellite with no evidence of life or artificial constructs. But why do so many missions, so many documents, and so many images seem to tell a different story? Have we been being fooled for decades? Are there secrets on the moon that will never be revealed to the public? Now, I want you to comment below what you think about this. Do you believe NASA hides information about the moon? Or do you think it's all just speculation? Right here in the comments. Does the moon hide something? And let's continue this investigation together, because the next revelations will surprise you even more. If the moon really were a completely sterile natural satellite without any type of external influence, how would we explain the countless anomalies found in its images? For decades, NASA has taken thousands of photos of its surface, and many of them show patterns that defy conventional explanation. Straight lines, symmetrical structures, and geometric shadows that do not match natural formations have been identified and, in many cases, simply ignored or dismissed as optical illusions. But is it really? Could it be that the moon hides something much bigger than we are prepared to accept? One of the most intriguing cases involves the so-called lunar towers. Structures that appear to rise from the surface as if they were remnants of ancient buildings. Several photos taken by Apollo missions and even by more modern probes reveal formations that have precise angles, something extremely unlikely to happen naturally. Rocks eroded by meteor impacts often form irregular ridges with no defined patterns, but these anomalies seem to defy that logic. Some of these structures are kilometers high, something completely incompatible with an environment where there is no erosion caused by wind or water. How could something like this form? Could they just be extremely rare natural formations or evidence that something or someone was once there? And it doesn't stop there. In addition to the towers, there are also reports of anomalies detected by radar that suggest the existence of huge underground caves on the moon. Some of these formations are explained as lava tubes, ancient volcanic structures that would have collapsed over millions of years. However, there are cases where radar signals indicate perfectly carved hollow spaces that stretch for miles beneath the surface. Could it be possible that these cavities were artificially excavated? And more importantly, are they still being used? Another factor that raises suspicions are the shadows and reflections captured in several missions. There are records of mysterious lights appearing on the lunar surface, some moving irregularly, as if they were some type of technology at work. And we're not just talking about little flashing lights. Some of these anomalies have been described as intense flashes large enough to be observed even by ground-based telescopes. What could be emitting these signals? An unknown geological phenomenon or something more? Additionally, many of the photos featuring these structures and anomalies are strangely edited before being released to the public. There are several cases of official NASA images where certain regions of the moon appear purposely blurred or obscured. Some of these areas appear to have been digitally smoothed, as if they were hiding something that couldn't be revealed. But the question remains, what exactly is being hidden? If we look at NASA's history, we can see a pattern. Whenever an anomaly is discovered, the official explanation tends to be vague and unconvincing. When asked about some of these strange formations, scientists simply claim that they are mere coincidences or illusions created by the angle of sunlight. But does this justification really make sense? Why do so many images seem to point to the existence of something that doesn't fit with what we know about the moon? And the issue goes beyond images. Old reports indicate that, even before the Apollo missions, astronomers were already recording strange events on the lunar surface. Flashing lights, moving shadows, and even unknown flying objects have been reported by experienced observers. Many of these records have simply been ignored or discredited. But why? What is it about the moon that needs to be kept secret? Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe NASA is hiding something about the moon? Or do you think all these anomalies can be explained by conventional science? Comment below, the truth is on the moon, if you believe there is something being hidden, or coincidence, or manipulation, if you think the images may have been altered. I want to see what you think about this, because in the next few minutes, we're going to explore something even more intriguing. If all these images already raise so many doubts about what really happens on the moon, what about the reports from astronauts who were there? Because, yes, there are surprising statements from people who have set foot on the lunar surface and returned to tell stories that have somehow always been minimized or hushed up. What did they see there? What can't they talk about openly? And why do those who try to expose this information end up contradicting themselves or being discredited? Buzz Aldrin, one of the most famous astronauts from the Apollo 11 mission, has already publicly mentioned that he saw something strange during the trip to the moon. In an interview, he described observing a bright object moving in an unusual way close to the spacecraft. The official explanation was that it could have been one of the stages of the Saturn V rocket, but Aldrin stated that engineers had ruled out this hypothesis. So what was it? A piece of space junk? Any unknown phenomenon? Or something much more intriguing? The curious thing is that, after this statement, Buzz Aldrin never delved into the matter further. It's as if he's been told not to talk anymore about what he saw. And he wasn't the only one. Eugene Cernan, the last man to walk on the moon in the Apollo 17 mission, also made an enigmatic statement that still generates debate today. He mentioned seeing unexplained structures on the lunar surface. Structures, this word does not suggest natural formations, but rather something that could have been built. Could it be an error of interpretation? Perhaps. But considering everything we've discussed so far, the edited images, the geometric anomalies, the lunar towers, can we really simply rule out this possibility? And what about the leaked documents? Some records indicate that there were broadcasts from the Apollo mission that were cut before reaching the public. Excerpts of audio mysteriously interrupted, conversations between astronauts that do not appear in the official transcripts. In one such case, reportedly during Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin reportedly used an alternate communications. Channel 2 report the presence of something unusual observing them in the distance. This story has been supported by former NASA employees who claim that there are recordings that were never made public. And there's more. There are documents that suggest that NASA already expected to find something on the moon even before the Apollo missions. The Horizon Project, for example, was a secret plan by the United States to build a military lunar base in the 1950s. Officially, this project never got off the ground, but the question remains, why was there so much interest in militarizing the moon decades before any manned mission? Did they already know there was something there that needed to be monitored or even protected? Declassified U.S. government reports also reveal that programs such as the CIA's remote viewing used remote viewing techniques to spy on specific locations in space. And, interestingly, one of the targets of these experiments was precisely the moon. Some of the descriptions made by those who participated in these sessions include the presence of gigantic structures, underground tunnels, and even signs of an ancient civilization that may have inhabited the satellite in the past. It's impossible not to link this information to the radar-detected anomalies we mentioned before. Now, these reports come from experienced astronauts, engineers, and even former military personnel. Why has NASA never officially spoken out about this? Why is it that every time this information appears, it is quickly discredited and thrown into the realm of conspiracy theories? If all of this were nothing more than wishful thinking, misinterpretation, or hearsay, wouldn't it be easier for the agency to simply expose concrete evidence refuting these allegations? But instead, what we see is absolute silence, as if it were more convenient to leave doubts in the air than to try to explain them. And you? What do you think of all this? Do you believe that NASA really found something on the moon and hid it from the public, or do you think these reports are just misunderstandings? Comment below, NASA knows something, if you believe there is a big secret being hidden or just coincidences. If you think everything can be explained logically. I want to know your opinion, because what we reveal next could completely change your view of space exploration. If there is something that has fascinated us since the beginning of humanity, it is the mystery about our origins and what may exist beyond our world. The moon has always been an object of worship, study, and the most diverse theories. But what if it's not just an uninhabited natural satellite? What if, at some point in history, the moon was home to an ancient civilization that disappeared, or, more impressively, an outpost of an extraterrestrial intelligence that has always been watching us? The idea that the moon was once inhabited by an ancient civilization is not just the delusion of conspiracy theorists. There are historical and even mythological records that point to the possibility that, in time immemorial, the moon could have been a place of intense activity. Some ancient cultures, such as the Sumerians and Egyptians, left enigmatic accounts about the inhabitants of the stars and the moon's connection with cosmic events that influence the Earth. There are African tribes, such as the Doggons, who have inexplicably advanced knowledge about celestial bodies, including the existence of Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye and discovered only with modern technology. They claim to have received this knowledge from celestial visitors who, interestingly enough, mentioned the moon as a place of great importance. And it doesn't stop there. The structure of the moon itself raises questions. Scientists have debated the composition and origin of our satellite for decades, suggesting that it may not be as natural as we have been led to believe. Did you know that the moon's density is strangely low for a celestial body this size? Some researchers even raised the hypothesis that the moon could be hollow or contain immense internal caves. This type of anomaly is not common on natural moons, raising even more intriguing questions. Could the moon have been used as a refuge by an ancient civilization that disappeared? Or, perhaps, like a gigantic spaceship covered in dust and meteorite impacts over millennia? What if instead of an ancient Earth civilization, we are dealing with something much bigger? The extraterrestrial hypothesis gains more and more strength when we analyze some of the images captured by space missions. There are records of lunar formations that resemble artificial structures, such as towers, pyramids, and even something that resembles landing strips. Some of these objects appear to be arranged geometrically, something extremely rare in natural formations. Could it be possible that an alien civilization has used the moon as a base of operations? Some theories indicate that the moon could be a strategic point for monitoring the Earth, functioning as an artificial satellite that has been observing US for centuries without us realizing it, and there is more evidence to reinforce this theory. Several astronauts have reported strange sightings during missions to the moon. There are reports of flashing lights on the lunar horizon, fast-moving objects, and even unidentified signals detected by spacecraft radios. In 1969, when the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin reportedly saw something that left them shocked. Some say they described spacecraft lined up watching the landing in encrypted communication with NASA's Control Center. This information has never been officially confirmed, but there are former employees who claim that recordings of these conversations were deleted from public files. What did the astronauts really see there? In addition to lunar anomalies, there are records of UFOs that appear to have extraterrestrial origins and have already been detected circulating around the moon's orbit. Satellite reports indicate that unknown objects have already been seen, leaving and entering the lunar shadow, suggesting that there may be underground bases still active. The most impressive, many of these records were captured by independent telescopes, meaning they are not information controlled solely by government agencies. And if there really are alien bases on the moon, the question remains, why doesn't anyone talk about it? Why do NASA and other space agencies avoid exploring the far side of the moon? For decades, there have been attempts at new manned missions, but all have been canceled or postponed indefinitely. The Artemis mission itself, announced for the next few years, appears to face constant barriers and unexpected logistical challenges. Is there something on the moon that these agencies know that we can't know? Could it be that all this hesitation in returning there has a much deeper and more disturbing reason than we imagine? Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the moon was inhabited in the past by an unknown civilization? Or do you think it still serves as an alien base for monitoring Earth? Comment below, the moon was once a home. Whether you believe in the theory of ancient civilization or the moon was never empty. If you think there is an extraterrestrial presence to this day, I want to know what you think, because what we're going to reveal next could completely change your perception of everything you've told us so far. Faced with all this evidence, suspicious images, reports from astronauts, and leaked documents, an inevitable question arises. Can all of this be explained in a rational and scientific way? Could it be possible that all these supposed anomalies are nothing more than optical illusions, errors of interpretation, or natural phenomena that we still do not fully understand? If the moon really hides such deep secrets, why doesn't the traditional scientific community recognize these possibilities? Or could it be that, in some way, this narrative was constructed to divert our attention from the truth? Some experts claim that the geometric formations seen in photos of the lunar surface could simply be a play of light and shadows. The lighting on the Moon is very different from that on Earth, due to the absence of atmosphere and the direct incidence of sunlight without dispersion. This can create visual effects that make certain rocks and landforms appear to have perfect angles or even artificial structures. It's the same illusion that happens here on Earth when we look at clouds and see recognizable shapes like faces or objects. Could it be that the so-called lunar towers are nothing more than rocks positioned in a way that our brain interprets as something unnatural? Another argument often used to refute the theory of artificial structures on the Moon is the impact of meteors and erosion caused by billions of years of exposure to space. The Moon is constantly bombarded by asteroids of all sizes, and these collisions can create formations that appear artificial at first glance. Some craters have symmetrical patterns precisely because they were formed by impacts at specific angles. The problem is that although this explanation is plausible for some formations, there are patterns that simply do not fit this model. How can we explain structures that repeat themselves with almost identical geometric shapes? How can we justify reliefs that appear planned instead of being random, as would be expected in an environment without human or extraterrestrial interference? What about astronaut reports? Have they been misinterpreted or exaggerated over time? Many of the testimonies of strange sightings on the Moon come from communications captured unofficially or attributed to anonymous sources. This raises the possibility that some of these stories may have been distorted over the years. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, for example, never officially confirmed that they saw anything unusual during the Apollo 11 mission, although there is evidence that private conversations with mission control suggest otherwise. But if there really was some visual contact with unknown structures or objects, why was there never a direct public report about it? Was it just the fear of ridicule? Or is there an active effort to discredit those who try to raise these issues? There is also a line of reasoning within science that suggests that the human brain tends to look for patterns where they may not exist. This phenomenon, called pareidolia, is the same one that makes us see faces on random surfaces or interpret familiar patterns in abstract images. This would explain, for example, why some people see pyramids or buildings in lunar photos, when they could just be piles of rock with strategically projected shadows. But are we really just talking about optical illusions? Or is there something more behind these images that makes us question the official version? Another point raised by skeptics is that if there really were alien bases or structures on the Moon, why haven't we found concrete evidence in recent missions? After all, we have already sent satellites, probes, and rovers that have mapped the lunar surface in high resolution. But the big issue here is that not all images captured are made available to the public. NASA has strict control over what is released, and several photos have already been proven to be altered or censored before reaching official databases. So does the absence of evidence really mean there is nothing there? Or is it just that the information we receive has already gone through a careful filter to ensure the public doesn't see what actually exists? Many scientists claim that the reason we no longer have manned missions to the Moon has nothing to do with hiding secrets, but rather with a lack of economic and technological interest. Going to the Moon is expensive, risky, and, according to them, there are not enough valuable resources to justify frequent missions. But this explanation also raises doubts. If there is nothing interesting on the Moon, why are countries like China, Russia, and even private companies like SpaceX increasingly interested in lunar missions? If it were a desert of worthless rocks, why the increasing effort to get back there? Is there something that governments and space agencies know that has not yet been revealed to us? Science teaches us to look for concrete evidence before making bold claims. But we must also remember that history has shown us countless times that what is considered impossible today may be an accepted truth tomorrow. For centuries, we believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, that flying was impossible, and that we would never reach space. If there's anything we can learn from the past, it's that science is constantly evolving, and that often the most uncomfortable truths are the ones that take the longest to be accepted. And now, I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that everything we have seen so far can only be explained as optical illusions and natural coincidences? Or do you think we are facing something that is being carefully hidden? Comment below, science or manipulation. If you believe there is something more behind these explanations, or just illusions. If you think that everything can be justified rationally, I want to see what you think, because in the next section, we're going to dive even deeper into this mystery. If everything we've discussed so far is already impressive, what comes next could be even more disturbing. What if the moon is not what we were told? What if, instead of a simple natural satellite, it is something much more complex, perhaps even artificial? This theory, which may seem absurd at first glance, has more foundations than you might think. There are independent scientists, engineers, and researchers who argue that the moon could be a megastructure, a colossal construction that is there not by chance, but for a specific purpose. Sounds like science fiction, perhaps, but when we analyze the data, we begin to realize that there are many unanswered questions about the real origin of the moon. The first intriguing question is the formation of the moon itself. The most accepted theory in science suggests that the moon was formed from a catastrophic impact between the Earth and a body the size of Mars. It's called Baea, billions of years ago. However, this theory has flaws. Samples of lunar soil reveal strange chemical compositions with elements that shouldn't be there. Furthermore, the moon's density is surprisingly low for a body this size, and some measurements of its gravity indicate that it may have huge internal caverns or even a hollow core. This leads us to the hypothesis that the moon is not an ordinary natural satellite, but something much more mysterious. Another piece of evidence that raises suspicions is the fact that the moon sounds like a bell when impacted. During the Apollo missions, astronauts performed seismic experiments on the moon by dropping modules that crashed into its surface. What happened was unexpected. The moon reverberated, as if it were a hollow metallic object. This is not something common in solid celestial bodies. This effect suggests that the lunar crust may hide something inside, perhaps a massive, artificially constructed structure. But built by whom and for what purpose? There are also reports that NASA abruptly ended its manned missions to the moon because it found something that could not be revealed to the public. Officially, the explanation for the interruption of the Apollo missions was budget cuts and a lack of political interest. But this justification never fully convinced. Why, after achieving such a great feat as landing on the moon, do we simply decide to stop and never return? Even more so, considering the fact that technology has advanced significantly since the 70s, making missions much safer and more efficient. Something doesn't make sense. If there is nothing there, why the fear of returning? Some sources indicate that during the last Apollo missions, astronauts witnessed inexplicable events. There are reports that strange lights have been seen on the surface, objects moving at impossible speeds, and, perhaps most intriguingly, that gigantic structures have been observed in the lunar craters. If this information is real, it could explain why we never send humans to directly explore the moon again. If NASA really found something that cannot be shared, that would explain the silence and public disinterest in lunar exploration for so many years. But things become even more intriguing when we analyze Project Horizon, a secret plan from the United States that, in the 1950s, proposed the construction of a military base on the moon. Documents from this project have been declassified and reveal that the U.S. government was already interested in establishing a presence on the satellite long before the space race intensified. The official objective was to create an outpost for strategic purposes and military monitoring. But was that really the only purpose? Or was there something already identified on the moon that needed to be studied and possibly controlled? After all, if the moon really hides unimaginable secrets, nothing would stop the world's governments from wanting to militarize and guarantee exclusive access to this information. The most curious thing is that, in recent decades, countries like China and Russia have shown a growing interest in the moon, suggesting that they may know more than they publicly reveal. China, for example, sent a mission to the far side of Kaltide, of the moon, the side we never see from Earth, and to this day has not released all the details about its discoveries. Why has this side of the moon always been a mystery? Are there structures or signs of activity that cannot be exposed to the public? All of this leads us to an even deeper question. Is the moon really just an inert body orbiting our planet, or could it be something much bigger? Perhaps a fundamental piece in understanding our own existence and our place in the universe. If this theory is true, it means we have been fooled for much longer than we realized. And if there's something on the moon that needs to be kept secret, who exactly is controlling that information? Who decides what we can and cannot know? Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the moon could be an artificial structure built by an unknown intelligence? Or do you think NASA found something that cannot be revealed and therefore stopped the lunar missions? Comment below. The moon hides a secret if you believe there is something mysterious, or is everything just coincidence? If you think these theories are nothing more than speculation, I want to see what you think, because what comes next could be the most shocking revelation of all. After everything we've explored, all the intriguing evidence, the suspicious images, the reports from astronauts, and the theories that challenge the official version, one inevitable question remains. Have we been fooled this whole time? Is the moon really just a natural satellite, a cold, lifeless rock orbiting our planet? Or is there something much bigger being hidden from us? If you stop to think about all the pieces of this puzzle, it's hard to ignore the inconsistencies. Why do so many NASA images appear to have been edited before being released to the public? Why do so many astronauts report mysterious experiences, but then seem to be silenced or discredited? Why did the last manned mission to the moon happen more than 50 years ago? And since then, we have never returned, even though current technology is much more advanced. Is there a forbidden truth, something that cannot be revealed to the population? And most intriguingly, if there is something on the moon that is being hidden, who controls this information? Is it just NASA, or are we dealing with something much bigger, a secret that goes beyond borders, governments, and even our understanding? The moon has always been there, lighting up our nights, influencing us in ways we can't even realize. But what if what we know about it is just part of the story? If there's one thing we've learned throughout history, it's that the truth often takes a long time to be revealed. And the bigger the secret, the greater the effort to keep it hidden. Now, I want to know what you think about all this. Do you think there is something being hidden? That the moon could be much more than we have been told? Or do you believe that all these theories are just coincidences and misunderstandings? Comment below. The moon has secrets, if you think there is something hidden, or just a rock, if you believe the official version. Your comment is very important, because this channel is a space for debate and for us to question everything they tell us. And if you've made it this far, I know that you're curious, that you like to question and explore the unknown. So, if you want to continue this investigation with me, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Not only does this help the channel grow, but it also ensures that you don't miss any of the upcoming videos because, believe me, what's coming next could be even more shocking if everything we've seen so far already raises so many questions. What's hidden on the far side of the moon could be even more surprising. This is the region we never see from Earth, a territory unexplored for decades and surrounded by secrets. Why did the first missions avoid this area? What did China find when it landed there? And why did some images simply disappear from public? Archives, there is information that has never been fully explained and records that indicate something beyond what we have been told. Now the question is, what is NASA really hiding on the far side of the moon? I'll wait for you there.